Now, since Ireland joined the EU all those years ago, 50 years ago, universities have played an increasingly important role in Europe, and I suppose have derived considerable benefits as well from enhanced European relationship with academic, social and enterprise communities. Now, I'm delighted to be joined on stage here by three of our university presidents to discuss some of the topics relevant to this evening's proceedings. We're joined by Professor Kerstin Mey, President of the University of Limerick, Professor Eeva Leinonen, President of Maynooth University. I hope I got that close to being right. And Professor Daire Keogh, President of Dublin City University. Great to have you with us, guys. It certainly brings a whole new meaning to fireside chat. The fire is big enough, we could all sit in it in the fireside. But good to have you with us. And I think it's very fitting. We've very much a European vibe to our panel tonight, with obviously Kerstin, you being from Germany originally, and of course Eeva being from Finland. And it's good we're represented by a dub as well. I'll start with the dub. Given you're on home turf, I'll start with you. Just in relation to DCU, because I know you very much pride yourself on the European Universities Initiative and the work you've done there. How has participating in that initiative helped expand your academic offering? And I suppose, what opportunities does it offer to students and as well to staff members as well?
I think, as Minister Byrne said at the outset about the excitement about Europe and the accession to Europe, and Europe is very much a project. And I think that in the context of Brexit, that discussion about Britain's decision to leave, and the English were very happy, the British, with the European Economic Community. They liked that element of it, and they still want that element of it, but it was the project part of it, I think, that they didn't want, they didn't like. Whereas, as the Minister pointed out at the outset, I think as Irish, for historical reasons, our focus has always been in Europe, whether Spain or France or Italy or wherever. So there's that outward-looking part. And I think that there's a sense too, with accession and so on, as both ministers said, the way in which we have grown. And Europe is part of our identity. And Davide Sassoli, who was President of the European Parliament, spoke about the Europe as a project. And for the critics, he said it was a lavoro in corso, it was work ongoing. And that sense of growing into Europe, I think, is very much a part of our identity. And I think of the universities represented here as young universities. Of course, Maynooth, founded 1795 in the context of the French Revolution, makes them particularly European. But for us, I think, we are better together. Diversity is a value of the university. Engagement with industry, engagement with enterprise, the flowering of the arts, all of those are values. Citizenship, opportunity for disadvantaged students, all of those are things that we value. So by joining together with our European partners in the European University Project, we can be better, and we will be better. And we've seen in the European University Project, and our project is called ECU, the European Consortium of Innovative Universities, we've seen the way in which relationships have changed, that many of the MOUs between universities really are acquaintances that we meet at conferences. And in our participation in ECU, we have transformed those into deep friendships and deep partnerships, and we are delivering more together. We've seen the success in the funding round this time, 14.5 million from the Commission to fund our efforts. We've seen kind of bilateral successes as well, partnering between universities, industries, all challenge-based. So it's particularly rewarding for us.
Okay, I'm thinking of the Irish phrase the Minister might have. Ní neart go cur le céile, is that the expression? What's that? Is it? Yeah, it's a good one. It is a good one. Kerstin, I know University of Limerick, you kind of see yourself as a European university, and I think you coincide actually with Ireland joining the Limerick being set up. You have ambitions to lead a European Universities Consortium. Talk us through some of the challenges involved in that, and also the opportunities, of course, as well.
Indeed, we are leading the Emerge Consortium and are readying ourselves to apply for another round. That has been, I think, a really rewarding project to build relationship with institutions in France, in Spain, in Germany, in Norway, in Slovakia, and also extend the reach to associate countries. I think the issue is, and Daire can probably confirm that, when you come together as institutions within Europe, you have to learn about your cultures, you have to learn about higher education in each of the countries, governance, the legislative frameworks, and you have to start building trust. And you build trust best by engaging in bilateral or multilateral projects to strengthen the consortium, to learn from each other. We want to work towards the creation of this pan-European university set up, but it means that we create European pathways for our programs of studies. That means that we bring our regulations closer together, maybe in future have one regulatory framework for our taught programs, but it starts there. Ireland is in a very fortunate position that universities are autonomous. We have the power to accredit our own programs. In other countries that has to be done through the ministry. So you have to find a way of working together to navigate the different requirements and identify a solution. And I think really important in that is that we right from the start work with our students, because it's the students that we are targeting to encourage them, as the ministers say, to engage in mobility, to study at least parts of their programs in other European countries, to being accultured to different contexts and are able to go forward as engaged European citizens. And that is a complex project that requires a sophisticated infrastructure and substantive funding.
Okay, and we might come back to that issue of student mobility in a moment. Eeva, can I bring you in? Can I talk to you about the Jean Monnet actions? Obviously, Jean Monnet, one of the founding fathers of the EU. To tell us how Maynooth is involved and how has the university benefited from this?
Thank you very much for that question. First of all, I just want to say thank you very much for a very warm welcome I've had to Ireland. I'm coming up to my first year, and it was interesting listening to the two ministers. I had a really good history lesson to Irish involvement in the European Union. As you probably, some of you know, I popped over to Australia for 9 years or so I have a bit of catching up to do, so a pleasure to hear. So the Jean Monnet actions, they go back to, I think, 1989 or thereabouts. So Maynooth University had a professor, Jean Monnet, professor already, I think it was European social policy in the 1990s. So it goes back a long way. And one of the things I wanted to just emphasize through that is that this is a long-term commitment. We talked about 50 years part of Europe, but this is looking also to the next 50 years. So we now have also a designated Centre of Excellence, which is our European Eurasian Studies Centre, and 2 professors at Maynooth University, Jean Monnet professors. And if we think about the impact of those programs, and I wanted just to say it's not just about Maynooth University at all, it's really about Ireland and what the ministers were talking about, integration, European integration, understanding, influencing social policy. And what also resonates in my mind was what Minister Harris said earlier, that universities are not just something nice to have, but they're actually a really integral part of this integration. So the Jean Monnet actions and those programs have been part of it, but more broadly, of course, about student mobility, staff mobility, integration of research, those big social and economic problems we are looking at together. So there's one thing that we don't often think about, and I've been sort of, having worked in various parts of the world, think about is the power of something like the Jean Monnet actions and the programs we have of actually bringing also international dimensions beyond Europe into that context, because through those centers we collaborate across the world. And that's another dimension that is really critical. So a benefit to our country, Ireland, but also benefit, of course, to Europe, students, staff, but also a broader international community. That's how I see it. Okay,
thank you, Eeva. Kerstin, you mentioned student mobility. I think the European Commission has some pretty ambitious targets for increasing student mobility. What can we do here in Ireland to achieve these targets, do you think?
Well, first of all, I think Ireland is very well positioned in order to support student mobility, because what I very much value about the country is that foreign languages are being taught from primary through secondary school up to tertiary level, and we were a university that introduced modern foreign languages right from the start, encouraging all our students, not just those who study languages or language combined programs, to take up modules and acquire at least the basic knowledge of a different language or advance their knowledge. I think that's really important in order to encourage people to venture out. Secondly, I do think it's to create opportunities through the curriculum that students can take a semester or years through Erasmus or study abroad outside of Ireland, and the Erasmus scheme is actually a fantastic scheme because it can also be applied to cooperative education. So we have over 700 students going out, and at least a third of them go on their cooperative education program to European countries. And I think thirdly, it's important that we support the development of joint and dual programs in Europe. Again, there's funding needed and support, because what we are facing is a differential in student fees. We have seen that ourselves. We have a joint master's with Europe University in Flensburg in European Studies, continuing our tradition as the first university to offer European Studies in Ireland. But we have to navigate the differential between the fees. The same applies to undergraduate programs, and we have to find a solution of encouraging joint degrees. And fourthly, I think all our universities, I think, have an opportunity to set up very conducive conditions for European students to come to Ireland, because it is important that the schemes like Erasmus are based on mutuality. And I've worked in other jurisdictions where it was a one-way
street,
to a one-way street, and Erasmus didn't really fulfill its ambitions in that respect.
Yeah, that's changing a little bit now, I think, is it?
It depends where you're looking for. In Ireland, it's a two-way street. We have equal, we have equal numbers going in and out. I was in the UK, and in the UK, Erasmus didn't work because we couldn't get UK students into Europe.
Okay. Daire, do you want to come in on that?
I mean, I think that the mobility is absolutely critical, but I think the Minister Harris, spoke earlier about the importance of access, and education is kind of lifting all boats, and participation rates in higher education. And it is really important that we look at those who are economically excluded from such mobilities. That the mobility, I think, has given us, from Peter Sutherland's time, fantastic opportunities for many of us to develop in so many ways. But we have large constituencies in all of our universities who don't have those opportunities. So the government's commitment there is absolutely critical to it. One of the questions, of course, that comes up again, and the great advantage we have has been the last, apart from Malta, of course, the last English-speaking nation in the European Union. But that will not carry us very far. That's like a timer, an egg timer running out. That we need to continue to invest in the quality of our education to be the very best that we can be, so people will want to come here, not simply because we speak English, but because we have a quality education environment and an intense research, intensive culture.
Okay, Eeva?
Yeah, just a couple of follow-ups from there. You know, it is good to have seen an increase of take-up of Irish students and going abroad. But I understand that about 5%, I hope I have the stats right, of Irish university students go on these exchanges. But Daire's point, less than 1% come from underprivileged or represented cohorts. And I think that's where we can step up, and we need to step up and think of ways how we do that. But also, what Minister Byrne talked about, the work experience, but also connecting with enterprise and work in Europe. And, you know, embedding into our curriculum. So I think, Kerstin, you talked about the importance of being part of the curriculum, i.e. year abroad or shorter periods of time abroad. I think that's really critical. And similarly, I think we should seek some opportunities and possibly put some funding around that for our students to go and have work experience in Europe. Because when they come back, they have a very different and diverse view of the world, which will benefit our nation. Okay. So I think those are the sort of key messages that I would say. And also another important message I think that resonates again with the Minister Byrne's point is that it's not simply about European studies or social studies. It is about all disciplines.
Of course, yeah.
Irrespective of what you study, there should be an opportunity to go abroad. And I think the challenge is how do we bring all students, those who come from more challenged backgrounds.
Okay, I think we have another few more minutes.
Yeah, just a second. I think it is critical to
Kerstin.
say that I think that the culture of the Irish University Association is open. It's engaged, our engagement with industry, our engagement with the chambers. Our agenda is reflected, we'll say, in the agenda of IBEC, of Congress, of the American Chamber, the British Irish Chamber. So we are blessed that there is that kind of unity of purpose. We know what we want to do. And to the Minister's point as well about inward migration, that we have been extremely lucky with the inward migration of talent, the linguistic talent, and also blessed that many of the migrant groups who have come to Ireland come from cultures that value education and are proud of the education. So we are better as part of Europe. Europe has been good for us. I know Minister Byrne credited the whole thing to Eamon de Valera. I think it was actually Charlie Haughey that delivered. But we are better as part of a big Europe than on our own.
Okay, okay. Kerstin?
Yeah, I wanted to add that I think COVID-19 has shown us that there's also significant value in exploiting opportunities through virtual mobility to prepare students to go and study or work in other contexts. And I do think we have to think about the formats. Not everyone can go for a year or semester abroad. Short-term mobility, I think, is a very valuable instrument as well, and it needs to be appropriately funded, particularly for those who are less privileged.
Okay, just a couple of more minutes to chat. I want to ask you about this emphasis we have on investment in research. Now, we're not very high up the league table, to put it mildly, the European league table. Now, maybe that is changing. The European Commission saying, look, EU funds, they're going to add some, they shouldn't be seen as replacement. I'm curious for your views to realise our national ambitions. Where would you like to see increased national funding? What should we be doing? Eeva, I might start with you.
I feared you would. Is Philip Nolan still here?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to... it's an easy ask to ask for more funding.
Yeah.
I'd just like to start by that and say that we need to probably think very hard about how to leverage the funding that we have to the best impact and greatest impact. And talking about impact, the National Strategy Impact 2030, I think has the right elements in it to take us into the kind of future where we will have a great impact for the funding that we have. There is a promise of more funding there, which is great. There's an element of recognition of strongly in the strategy about international and European collaboration and the power of collaboration to really have a greater impact for what we do in this country. So I also value, what I really value about that strategy is that it's starting to look at priorities. Because we all know that we have limited funding. So there is an approach where you say you let all flowers bloom and see what comes out of it, but also the fact that there's more of a focus and priorities, which I think will take us a long way. How those priorities then match with European funding priorities and so it's another piece of work that we need to do. But I think they are, around climate and sustainability. They are around health, of course, aging. They're about digital transformation and service excellence, public sector reform, if I dare say, and so on. So, there are some really close sort of resonance there with the European agendas and Irish agendas, and we need to somehow bring those together through, for instance, I think one good action there is bringing the funding models, funding sources together, because future is about collaboration of arts, humanities, social sciences, science, and through that we will look at the big challenges of the world and in Ireland, Europe and beyond, and we can solve them by bringing those disciplines together. So a lot of good elements, I think, in the strategy, and now it really is about how do we implement that and how we put the funding around that and leverage that to the best benefit.
Just again very briefly, just to echo the points that We haven't had a PRTLI or equivalent since 2015. Some of the equipment we use there since 2009, PRTLI 1. But I think that the kind of prioritisation that the President's talking about, that when we move to the next stage, that culture of open access and sharing of expensive equipment. So we have the NRF, for instance, in DCU is a good example of a top-of-the-range facility that's open to researchers. And I think we could get much better bang for our buck by devoting scarce resources to shared facilities and to reduce the level of competition that exists between the institutions at the moment.
Okay. Just to finish, I might just ask you all, it's more of a journalist question, I suppose, than an academic question. If we were all here in 50 years' time, which I certainly won't be, whatever about the rest of you.
Simon Harris will.
If we were back here in 50 years' time for the 100th anniversary, where would you like to, where should Irish universities be in the European context? Where would you like to see us? Kerstin, nice easy question. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm sure I won't be alive then, but I would want to see Irish universities taking a lead part in Europe, engaging invention, innovation, and above all, engage citizenship in Europe, because the European project can only survive if it's led by its citizens.
Okay. Daire?
I think at its heart, education, and as universities we're educators, is the profession of hope. It's agricultural, it's not a machine. And I think that we plant the seed to allow future generations to flourish. And I hope that we have our institutions, and that as a state we're on a path where our citizens in 50 years' time will say we are flourishing because of the investment and the commitment to education that they had 50 years ago.
Okay. Eeva, last word to you.
Maybe I just use Mr. Harris's words again, which is that universities are not just something nice to have. They are at the centre of where we are now in 50 years' time.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to Daire, to Eeva, and to Kerstin.
Thank you very much. Well done. Thanks. Well done. Mind yourself.